This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Well, welcome to our She Sparks Wednesday, Tuesday, whatever day it is, meetings. We have Stacy Wheeler with us today. How are you?
Lovely, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Stacy's a commercial real estate agent and a female one at that, which I'd like to touch on that maybe later in the conversation because
Sure.
that's a feat in and of itself. But we wanted to have y'all on and just talk about commercial real estate, and preferably from most of us are residential real estate agents, what it's like to work with a commercial agent, what we should know, all of that in our realm. So if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself and give us a little background, we can get rolling.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Stacy Wheeler. I work with Carla and Company, which is a mostly female commercial boutique firm. We were with Keller Williams for quite a while, and then we ended up branching out about 2 years ago on our own, and so we have our own firm now. 90% of our brokers are female, and we have some referral agents, but we sort of live in commercial land. We don't branch out into residential unless we're referring out. And so I've been full-time brokerage for a little over 2 years. I sort of started in operations part-time, and I just sort of fell in love with it and have sort of taken it to the next level. Especially last year, I was really fortunate and had a successful year. So I'm just sort of keeping that momentum going. I plan on being here a while.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So start off and tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a female commercial agent. I know we said we'd hit this later, but let's just start with the big guns.
Yeah. So I think we all deal with the same things where we are sometimes dismissed, and it seems to be a little more prevalent in commercial real estate, especially with other brokers that are a little bit older male. They tend not to think of us in the same league as they are in. And so you really have to dig in hard, and you have to prove yourself out the gate. So there's not a lot of wiggle room to earn their respect. And as much as you don't want to depend on having to earn their respect, ultimately it comes down to relationships, and that's how you get things across the line. So we just, as a team, we're really supportive of each other. And if we have an issue, or if we know someone that tends to work a certain way, we're really good about reading people. And at this point, we know the way that they work. So we really sort of try to get to their level and approach them in a way that they understand. And even if that's like a formatting of a document, or they don't use email because they've sort of never had to use email before, and you really have to get into the nitty-gritty of what works for them. But in the end of it all, we can come to an agreement, and they know now that we can work with them and that we are probably smarter than them in some aspects. So it's really just getting past that barrier of being frustrated and upset with the way that it is, and just pushing through and trying to make it happen and get it across the line.
Do you think that Carla, the company is changing the face of female agents in commercial real estate?
I do think so. I think there are a lot more females that have the confidence to start doing it now, because, like, for instance, Debbie Lane with Beverly Hanks, she's been in the game for a really long time, and we all look up to her a lot. And we actually all talk to her and we meet with her, and she's a huge benefit and a resource for all of us. But I think just seeing her as a commercial broker and just female land, seeing her be so successful, and then we have sort of a pod of all of us that have done really well and produced a lot over the past couple of years. And Carla's really involved in a lot of boards and things like that. Just seeing that it's possible, and that you don't have to fit into the certain mold. You can't be like a 60-year-old male. I do think it's changing the face of things. And we're a little more progressive, and we do things differently, and we brand ourselves differently. So it's sort of changing the scope in general in Asheville. One example would be Google. I mean, our Google reviews, we've got 50. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but we have 50 Google reviews, and we have 5-star reviews. But if you look at the older firms that have sort of the older clientele or the older brokerages, they don't even have a Google review page, or they only have like 3 reviews. So even that small snippet of like marketing yourself, that's changing the whole scope of things.
And I'll say, I think that's the future of real estate agents that are really gonna, and I think we would all agree with that in this room, that are gonna keep moving and shaking as we see market shifts, is branding yourself, getting out there, being individuals, being supportive of each other as women, which is what we try and do at She Sparks. But that's cool. Let's dive into commercial a little bit. What are the basic terms and items we should know to start the conversation when a residential client says, hey, I've got a commercial space, or I've got a commercial thing. Can you help me?
So the biggest thing to sort of understand about commercial is there's a really broad scope, and we cover a lot of ground. So we have four basic clients that we service. Sorry, I'm trying to think through them all as I'm talking about it. So we do seller, buyer, and then in buyer, we do investor, owner, user, and then we do tenant and landlord. And so understanding if someone comes to you and says, oh, I have this commercial thing, what exactly is it? You don't have to get down into the nitty gritty of it, but is it a building that they want to sell? Is it a space that they've seen and they want to lease it because they want to open a space? Are they interested in an office building that they saw that they want to maybe occupy part of, but they want to see about purchasing all of it? It's really just finding out what exactly it is that their end goal is with one property. So do they want to sell it? Do they want to buy something? Do they have a building that they want to lease out to a tenant? Those are those starting points of figuring out sort of which direction you're going to go, because every transaction is very different and they all flow differently based on the type of client that you're working with. So your seller client versus your landlord client, although they're both trying to sell something or lease something, they're both very different transactions. So getting sort of a wide grasp on what they want to do, that's the best place to start.
That's awesome. So a residential agent comes to you. What do you think would be helpful for us to know as far as, should we know what triple net leases are? Should we know, how much do we need to inform ourselves? And that would make you happy as a commercial agent that we're going to pass a lead off of to you, or perhaps try and work with you in the future.
Yeah, we try really hard to listen to everything that you guys give us and make sure that we're piggybacking on all of it. But a lot of times there isn't a whole lot of information, and that's okay. Knowing what a triple net lease is, yes, it is helpful, but ultimately we're going to have to dig into it and find those numbers for everybody. Do you want me to talk a little bit about triple net leases, or do you want me to kind of keep it broad?
Yeah, no, talk about them.
So triple net leases are very interesting. They actually didn't start in Asheville. Well, you can't really quote me on numbers, but it's a more recent thing, probably like in the past 5 to 8 years, triple net leases have started. It's because the inventory and the vacancy is so tight in Asheville. You can really compare it to larger cities like New York, Brooklyn, some places in Florida, California. And what it is triple net is a pass-through charge. So the landlord actually pays the property tax, the property insurance, and then all the common area maintenance. But what they do is they take those consolidated bills at the end of the year and they lump them all into one big cost, and then they divvy it out per square foot. So it's basically the tenant paying for the landlord cost. And that usually looks like, if you have a base rent of $20 a square foot, then you may have a triple net charge of like $3 to $4. So ultimately you have a base rent rate, and then you have another charge on top of that that comes in the form of a monthly payment. So it's really just the landlord getting all of their costs and the tenant having to pay those along with all their utilities. And if they have to upfit the building, there's a whole different way to work that. It's just a lot of moving parts. But triple net is basically a pass-through charge.
Interesting. So as far as upfitting a building, what are the different ways, and I know this is a big question, so maybe just gloss over it. What are the different ways that a tenant can expect that to be handled depending upon, different situations?
It really depends on the scope of the build out. So, and let me think how to answer this in the most helpful way. It depends on the scope of the project. A lot of it is going to depend on what that looks like. For instance, if you have some sort of retail space that you want to lease, but you want to put a tap room in there, then you can ask your landlord for some sort of tenant improvement money. And that tenant improvement money will usually be a number that's agreed, it will be a number that's agreed to up front. And then the tenant will take those funds and know that they will be reimbursed that once they are open for business. And these are all very general timelines. So tenant improvement money is one way to do it. A lot of times, especially in Asheville, if you have like an out of town owner, they don't want to have to deal with the tenant improvement monies, nor having to reimburse and look at receipts and all those things. So what they'll do is they will help out a tenant in the form of rent free. And depending on how big the project is, you could get a month rent free, or you could get a year rent free, or you could get whenever you could get your rent free until you have your certificate of occupancy through the city. The other part of that with tenant improvement money or upfit is that you have to deal with the city or the county that you're with. And you have to really think about how much time that's going to take to get your drawings approved. In order to get permitting, you have to make sure up front, and I always say this, I would always get an architect involved. You got to make sure where you stand on code compliance with anything that you're upfitting. Because if you're in the floodplain, if you've got environmental to deal with, if your code compliance is that you have to come up to full site compliance, then you're talking about curb cuts and landscaping and street trees and all of the other things that come with upfitting a business into a tap room versus retail, along with occupancy. Another big cost that we see a lot of, especially because we have a lot of larger tap rooms around, is if you have a building that's more than 5,000 square feet and you're going to do some sort of assembly use in there, you're going to have to sprinkle it. And sprinklering a building is very expensive. And so that's one of the big costs that we try to mitigate up front between a landlord and a tenant. So there's a lot of different ways to slice it depending on what it is. If you have something that's more turnkey, like a retail space and another retail business is going to go in there and they want to like move a register counter, you don't have to really do permitting for that unless you're moving electrical. And the landlord probably wouldn't, they may give you like 30 days rent free in order for you to get moved in and get going, but you don't have to get a CO for that. So it takes less time. So it really just depends on the flexibility of the landlord and the scope of work that has to be done to the space. Did we freeze? Did you lose me?
I can hear you. Abby,
I can hear you. Abby looks frozen.
She's in a cute position though, so that's really good.
So interested in what I have to say.
It's so good. It further solidifies the fact that I don't want to work with commercial real estate.
I mean, you know, it's something I do it every single day. And so I've sort of gotten my patterns down, and I know how to sort of navigate the architectural thing. And we have a lot of referral partners. And for me, I believe myself to be severely ADHD. And so going in different directions often is helpful for me just to keep the ball rolling. And I'll have a lot of different projects going on at one time, but that's really helpful in general, because another thing that people probably think about commercial that's not necessarily true is that we get all these giant paychecks, and it's just that's not the case. And if we do get those, they're usually like a year to 2 years in the making. So I work a lot with leases just as like a baseline. And then I have my other buyers and sellers and developers and all of that on top of that. So you got to create a sort of lean, because you'd have a lot of lean months. You have to create a really solid pipeline of what you know that's coming in.
So, Stacy, quick question while we're waiting for Abby. She's got new construction next to her, so I wonder if her internet got cut off again, poor thing.
Oh gosh.
You know, I've heard from you that a lot of other realtors, residential realtors, will want to like split it 50-50 with you.
Mhm.
Why is that the case? Are they trying to learn from you? Or like, to me, I think it's very beneficial just to get rid of it and take 25%, like, because you know what you're doing and I do not, and just stay out of it. But help me understand.
Most of them do want to learn, because a lot of people want to do resi-mercial, and there are some people that are really good at it, but it's a really tight niche and you've got to be really well versed in it. A lot of people want to do it 50-50 because they want to learn and they want the payout on the larger things. Now leases, those are so tough, and quite honestly, it's usually like less than $3,000 on a paycheck, because it's based on the initial term of the lease. And I think that's a question we'll get to later, but leases are based on the amount of square footage per square foot price, and then the initial term of the lease, and you get 3%. So if you've got like 1,500 square feet at $20 a square foot on a 3-year lease, that's only like $3,700, and it's a really long time frame, and it's a lot of administrative work. Generally, when we see people that are doing 50-50, it's a residential person or a residential broker owns a property and they want to sell it commercially, and so they'll want to stay on. But a lot of times when we just have a referral, but they want to do it 50-50, it's because they want to learn the business and try to figure it out. Because there's a lot of different nuances to all the different things that we do. And we tend to stay away from that a little bit. We're happy to talk about it on a case-by-case basis, but what we have seen and what I've experienced in the past is that because we have the experience and we're trying to get it across the line, we end up doing a lot of the heavy lifting, which we're happy to do. We just want to make sure that everyone's fairly compensated for it. Did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yay! I'm on a roll.
Well, sorry about that. I got kicked off, but it seems like everything kept going without me. I love that. Wish my home life would do that.
Same.
Anybody else have any questions for Stacy while I pull up the list that we had? Question list.
Well, my question is more like, so I've done 3 commercial transactions like in my 2.5 years of real estate, and they all like went smoothly, and I mean, I'll be honest though that like I had a lot of help on the other side. Like my first one was with Carla, and she was awesome because she basically like mentored me through it. You know, she's like, okay, I don't like usually share this with people, but here's like a letter of intent, you know, like a draft letter of intent. I had no idea how to put a letter of intent together. And, you know, I think I was just like, I was transparent, you know, at the front end. But I guess my question is like, is that super irritating for you as a commercial agent? Would you just rather be like, hey, give me the lead, I'll give you a referral and I'll take it from here? Like what's sort of your like posture about that?
Myself, I'm happy to keep people in the loop, more than happy to do that. I would prefer to take the referral and just run with it, because I have my own cadence that I work well with. And in order for me to get into that cadence, I really have to work it from the beginning and know exactly where I stand. And I think that's why I have been, and the team has been really successful in getting things across the line, because a lot of times things do fall out. But we have a really good track record of getting them to closing. If there's an inexperienced or not commercial broker on the other side of things, yeah, we do the heavy lifting and we move past it. And we all sort of subscribe to what Carla does as well, which is help as much as we possibly can, because at the end of the day, we're in the best interest of our clients trying to get something to close on the buyer and the seller side. So we're really candid and transparent with everything. And we're also happy to help, because in the end, it benefits all of our clients.
And I think, it's really helpful. And I think, you know, in hindsight, like I'm grateful for the experience. Like I'm glad to have done those transactions, because I did learn a lot. And I just sort of took the approach of like, okay, I'm going to learn a a bit about commercial here. And so I would study and I would look at stuff, and I wasn't just like, what do I do now? I mean, it was like, I tried to be resourceful, in the process, but I think probably at this point, my gut instinct would be like, I'm gonna give it to Stacy. Let her take it from here. Like, once you build relationships and I think at the end of the day, it's like, who do I trust with my clients? If I started working with them, I'm really reluctant to pass them off unless I really know that they're going to be in good hands. So I think that was part of the kind of reluctance before, is like, I didn't know people on the commercial side. I didn't know a lot of people on the residential side. So in terms of referring business, it was, I was just green. So now I feel a little more, well-versed in terms of like when to keep, when to refer. So I guess that's just kind of the benefit of experience.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I think it just depends again on the scope of what the project is. I mean, if you have sort of something that's really cut and dry, then yeah, go for it. I think a lot of times when people get into floodplain and environmental and upfitting things or building things that aren't cookie cutter, I think that's when it gets a little bit tougher. But good for you for figuring out things, because there are a lot of people that don't want to figure out things. So thank you. And I will say we do get a lot of referrals, or we just get a lot of people in general that call us, especially about leasing, that say, we can't get anybody to pick up the phone. And that is one thing that we are very serious about, is that everybody is deserving of time, and everybody is deserving of a level of respect, where this may be your pipe dream and it may not be coming to fruition for 5 years, but it's your dream and you should be allowed to talk to somebody about it that knows what they're doing. So we work with a lot of clients that are from the ground up, that haven't even started a business yet, but we are able to connect them with resources in the community, whether it's angel investors, whether it's an SBA loan lender, whether it's Mountain BizWorks, whatever that looks like, we can kind of help them from the ground up. And if it's your client and we're helping them do that, then you've provided them an extra resource. So that's how we operate.
I think that's probably part of also why you're moving the needle, because that's not that. I don't think that's a traditional way for commercial.
I don't think so.
At least, yeah, maybe it's just in our area. Maybe it's in the South. Maybe it's everywhere. I can't speak to that, but it almost honestly feels like more of a woman's touch. And I could be out of place, but if Carla's the one that's leading that feel, like, good for her for making the change, and for you guys being on board for that change. Okay, so talking about these really green people, what's the financial process when a client decides if they can afford a property or not?
So that's a tough one, because you have to start asking really hard questions up front that people aren't sometimes prepared for, especially people that really, really, really want to be in a business, but they really don't have any funding. That is really, it just boils down to the individual. I mean, it depends on what your assets are. SBA loans have been the best way to get things across the line over the past couple of years. Traditional lending, like during COVID, there was zero traditional lending for any type of hospitality. Angel investors through like Venture South or Mountain BizWorks does loans. They don't really do angel investors. But it just depends on what they have. You can get a lease. And if your landlord is not checking things, which is not how we operate on the landlord side, but if the landlord's not checking things, your tenant could go into a lease without any kind of financial backing. And then in 2 years, a year and a half, they're knocking on your door again because they can't afford their lease. So we try to vet people on the very front end of things so that we can help better navigate what their future looks like in a space. Because if their business isn't something that's scalable, then there's no need for them to go into a giant space that they're not going to be able to afford in 2 years. So that's sort of like a baseline where we are with financials. Does that answer your question?
Do you feel like you do business coaching too? Like, that's kind of what this piece sounds like.
I don't know that we don't really do coaching necessarily. We try to talk to them about what their lease looks like in the scope of their business plan and what that overhead cost is going to look like for them if they're producing candles or if they're producing beer, whatever that looks like. And a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. And we're like, no, just you need to take a look at these items and see where you are, because your rent is going to escalate year after year. And so that's something that maybe you're not thinking about. So we try not to get into the nuts and bolts of it, but we do try to make sure that they understand that in order to have a sustainable space, which is the sustainable business, they really have to have it together up front. Or some sort of supplemental income coming in throughout that process where they're getting going.
This is all really helpful information.
Yay,
So
good.
kind of circling back on Asheville specific, you said it's really tight as far as the leasing goes and all of that. So should we all invest in commercial real estate in Asheville?
Yeah. if you can find something to purchase, yes, you should. We spend a lot of time lately looking for off-market properties. We're going back through leases just to see, obviously we track when they expire, but we're also going through to see when things are becoming vacant if they're not our clients. Because inventory is really tight for tenants, and it's an incredibly tight market for developers. The hotel moratorium we thought was going to slow things down. It did not at all. And it's not even hotel developers more than it is the multifamily that are trying to get on the affordable housing track. The biggest challenge with developers from the ground up is that there are very few parcels that connect to city water and sewer. For example, 44 Rockwood, I had under contract for roughly 6 months. And we had to go through, there was 2 accesses for city water and sewer. One of them was through a hotel, which they would not allow my developer to use because they wanted to develop a hotel. So then you had to go through another parcel, which we could have purchased, and that was okay. But then you had to go through into a residential HOA. And the only way to get sign off on that was 100% HOA buy-in, which is never going to happen. So we ended up having to terminate that. But the long and short of it is we've got so many people that want to invest in development, but there's just the MSD doesn't support it and the infrastructure doesn't support it. So you'll see a big slowdown on that. And which that does is pushes people into existing buildings, and those are getting snatched up left and right. But I will say, a lot of sellers are very proud of their properties right now. So the prices are a little high. So those are
proud of their properties.
They are very proud. And those are a lot of the ones that you'll see like downtown that have been on the market for a while that are priced at above 2 million. It's just hard. It's hard to get an investor to go into those buildings. If you can find an owner user that can make the numbers work, then that's your best bet. But generally, investors that are trying to get into downtown Asheville or just Asheville in general, they're priced out because the income doesn't match up.
What effect are you seeing on either invest or like developers or just tenants trying to find space with like the increasing homeless population, increasing crime, violent crime, like in downtown Asheville? I mean, I showed property to some commercial tenants, and they were really concerned. I mean, about the space that they were, and they're in Asheville, like they live here. It's not like they're from out of the area, but they were just like, I don't know about this. So I'm just curious from your perspective.
It's tough. I mean, it's really tough, especially if you have people coming in from out of state that want to lease. If they're local, then they're a little more lenient with it. But truly, the spaces are so few and far between downtown, especially for retail. It is a highly competitive market. And so even if they don't love the foot traffic that is mixed in, they'll still go for the space, and you have to present really well and a strong offer in general to get those spaces. Now with we have the listing on the new development that's coming in between Charlotte and Oak Street, where the new YMCA and First Baptist Church in Asheville are going to be. So between Charlotte, Oak, and College Street, are y'all familiar with that One Oak Plaza? I think they announced it a couple of weeks ago. It was on WLOS. But they're putting in a ton of commercial office and retail space. And so that's going to be like true Class A space. And I think that will help with the inventory, but that's still 2-3 years out. So until that happens, or until there's some delivery of really large space, I think we're going to continue to see a really tight squeeze on downtown, especially.
When did you see the pivot start to happen post-COVID? Because obviously, like COVID, all of these people got out of commercial spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Now our inventory is tight again. Can you pinpoint when you feel like you saw that start happening?
What was really interesting to us is that COVID happened, and we thought everybody was going to flee all these spaces and everything was going to become available. And we were so excited. We were ready for the feeding frenzy. And what happened was there was such a huge backlog of people that wanted to be in those spaces. They got in there before we sometimes even had a chance to. And then sort of like the second wave of COVID happened. And that's when a lot of your restaurants who had gotten their PPP money and it had been spent, they were exhausted and they couldn't find staff. And so then we saw this new sort of inventory open up for restaurants, especially smaller ones and some larger ones too, like Zia. That was one of our clients. We were able to get Taco Boy placed in there, which was nice. But I don't know, there were definitely 2 waves. I can say that. I don't know that I can pinpoint it. But right now, what we're seeing is we're still seeing a lot of people that want to get out of restaurant, but we're seeing a lot of fresh legs that want to get into restaurant. So it's just a matter of placing people where they need to be. Did I answer that?
Yeah. Where do you see, and now we're like very this region specific, but I'm just going to kind of lean into it here. Mm-hmm. Where are buildings going in that you can talk about that we on the residential side might be worth knowing?
The largest project that we have going on right now is that we call it the Furman project because that's the developers. I think it's called Asheville Aspire, and that's the One Oak Plaza. So that's going in, and they're going to have they will have residential in there and commercial. You also have the development that's going in where the Sheraton is right now. That'll be coming out of the ground. I'll have to check my portal and see. I have a whole spreadsheet of developments coming up. You also have a couple of developments that are happening along Hilliard. So you'll see about 300 apartments coming out of the ground behind the Patton with some commercial space on the bottom. The Ironwood project, which was on Cox Avenue. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that. It's like across from Well Played.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, that one. That one's really interesting, and they actually have put that on the market, and that is being listed at $40 million, and it includes all the entitlements and the drawings and the architectural and the engineering and all of that, and the parking lot that they are still working on as they work through litigation. So those are the main ones downtown. I don't have my finger on the pulse of a lot of things that are happening sort of on the outskirts of downtown. But we do track all of the larger developments in the immediate area, sort of in a really tight, like Eagle Street that just went in. I can send you my list. Actually, I set myself up with that City of Asheville, the portal where they announce the developments. They tell you like if it's level 1, level 2, level 3, and what has been submitted, and then if they're going to approve it. So that's really helpful because you know exactly where things are going and where to look.
Oh, that is helpful. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah,
these mixed use.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like you brought up the One Oak Plaza. You said it's commercial and residential. How's that residential side managed? Do you guys manage that, or are you going to get a listing partner?
Know that yet?
In general,
we don't know.
So can we talk like broad strokes? Are those managed a bunch of different ways, or do you?
It depends on the developer. I mean, like Eris, Hotel Eris, they had their hotel group, but then they sort of contracted out with a residential broker that sold all of those upper level condos. And she worked for the hotel for a while and then was their broker. Same with the ones that are down Biltmore Avenue, sort of close to the new wing place, like go past Orange Peel. They had a broker, a residential broker that was working on those condo units. That would strictly be a residential brokerage as far as going with a residential. And so it would be something that eventually we would have to pair up with someone to do that, because we can't do the residential part of it, but we can do the commercial part. And in general, if you can figure out who the developer is and how they are going to market those spaces, that's a good lead for you guys. I mean, if you can get the listing on 6 downtown condos through a developer, they're not going to sit there long.
Yeah, that's not the worst. That's not the worst lead source ever.
No. So I would, it's the Asheville Planning and Development Department, and they are generally helpful. During COVID, it was really tough because they were all remote, but now you can actually walk in there and ask them a question and they'll give you an answer.
Awesome. Well, that covers all of my, except for a personal. How'd you get into commercial? What drew you to it?
It's kind of snafu. So I opened, I'm not really sure how I got here. I opened so my background is in hotel sales, and I was in Chattanooga for 10 years doing hotel sales, like really high level. Came to Asheville, was doing hotel sales, and I opened the Hyatt Place downtown, which is now the DoubleTree. And that was when my boys were like 3 and 5. And so I just was missing a lot. And so I decided I was just going to stop. And so I stopped working for a little while, and then I was getting really antsy. And I started working with Carla like 3 hours a day. And she was like, I need more help. You're great at this. Can you get your license and go full time? And I was like, sure. So I did operations for Carla for quite a while, and then finally just decided to move into the brokerage side of it, which was terrifying. But ultimately, like, I've landed where I think I need to be. I think it's probably one of the most challenging and rewarding things that I've ever done, because it's really fun to have some small business that's going to open and they need help with all these upfits and coding and permitting and all that, which I'm not an expert in, but I can navigate the waters, and then be able to walk into their store 6 months later and be like, oh my gosh, hey, like, this is really cool. So I don't know. For me, that's how I got into it. And I plan on sticking around. I mean, as long as I can fill my pipeline, I'm a happy camper.
Awesome. Well, Kirsten, Kimmy, do you guys have any other questions?
I have 1 million questions, but they are all slightly home inspection / GC based. I would love, I'll definitely take you up on your coffee. Did you share your contact information? I can shoot you a text.
I can. Let's see.
Yeah, this is awesome. And yeah, Kristen, you're brave to like do this. I was like, I'm always referral, team referral. It's even residential real estate. I'm licensed in residential real estate, but I have reached the point of where I am not doing a client a service, doing the justice if I attempt to weasel my way through residential real estate anymore. So anyway, this is awesome. Thank you. And I look forward to meeting with you, Stacy.
Of course. Yeah. My pleasure.
Well, and Stacy, I kind of mentioned this on the phone call yesterday. You've got a variety of different brokerages in our group, one of which all 3 of us are with EXP, and there's no EXP agent, commercial agent. So it's like, we don't have a referral source that would be automatic. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other, I don't know what Freestone, if Freestone has a commercial division, or if all these other residentials have a commercial division, but yeah, like, talk about a lead source. Now, it's not always the best to pay referrals, but it's not the worst to have money in your pocket.
It's not the worst. And, we just, at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that you're making money, I'm making money, your clients are happy and they're successful and they're sustainable. And so if we can help do that, then that, for me, that's the end game. I would never want to put somebody in a space that's not going to work. That doesn't benefit anyone, and it's not helpful for the community, and it's not helpful for you. So maybe it is a little bit of that female woman's touch thing where you just want to see good for everybody, and sometimes you got to refer it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna reach out to you, Stacy, because I have my stylist, my hairstylist. We've been trying to find space for her, and we just like beat our head against the wall because there's just like nothing.
Hard.
Yeah,
it is tough out there. I will tell you. I mean, we are grinding trying to find off-market things or people that are going to be turning over their leases soon. It is tough. I'm more than happy to talk with you about it. I will be super transparent with you though, if it's something that I will continue to look for, and I don't have the answer right now, but I'm always looking.
Good.
Always searching.
Well, and she's somebody I'd be willing to like, hand her off to you, like do a warm transfer to you. But yeah, just because I think you'd be in the end more helpful than I'll be.
Well, I will help however I can. We like to call it the tuck and roll.
I like it.
Do you guys mostly focus on Asheville? We have about 10 minutes left here. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on Canton.
So are you all going to the meeting, the Asheville meetup? Yeah, so I'll be there for that. I'm super interested to hear what happens. But what has happened since they announced the plant is that we've had a slew of people that are interested in commercial over there. Just because the only thing that's been preventing them from going to that area is the air quality. So I do think it's probably going to be the next little old fort, honestly.
I say the next little Black Mountain. Again, we're all agents. Let's take our crystal balls out and, predict the future. But yeah, I'm going to put a post on the She Sparks group tomorrow. I already have it scheduled to say like, hey, the mayor of Canton is speaking in this AVL meetup, like if you want to go. And I invited my client who works for Evergreen, but he's virtual. So his job was saved. So, cause we're like, all right, do we buy in Canton now? Is it the next Black Mountain? Is it the next,
I mean, where else do we go is the real answer. I mean, a lot of time, I will say this, a lot of times I have conversations with out of town buyers, and I have to be really, because they're like, this is exactly what I want, and I will not deviate from it. And that is acceptable if you're willing to be really patient. But what we do have the conversation about is like geographical constraints, where we have to say like there are mountains and rivers and railroads and things that really constrict what you want. And so with Canton opening up, that sort of opens another little pocket that we can get into and potentially turn into something cool,
I do know that there is one other factory. I'm sure there's going to be a ton, but I personally know that there is one other factory that's like talking to Evergreen about potentially going that space, which I think would be, I don't know how to feel about that as far as, would that be bad? Or like, should we all just stand and wait? I think we're all on the same page of like, who knows, but.
Well, and didn't Roy Cooper come out and say that they couldn't sell? I don't know if Kristen, you saw that.
I saw the article, and it had something to do with funding that they received. And he's like, if you close, you have to repay that. So there's like a huge financial implication to them just shutting down. So I think they're going to be looking at creative options.
I think they'll have to, because I think, isn't it to the tune of like 12 to 15 million?
It's a lot. It's a big number. Mm-hmm.
I think if they could figure out a way to redevelop that space, I mean, here's another little mountain town right next door to Asheville.
I think like if you look at Winston-Salem and Greensboro and what they've done with a lot of those cotton mills and how they have really recreated them to mixed use, like true mixed use space. Mm-hmm. I think it would be great for Canton, but
like the Durham Bowl space too, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of potential. I guess we all just have to sort of sit around and see.
And who knows all the like, backdoor side room conversations that are happening. I'm sure there's millions of them happening. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll be interested to go to that meetup and see what comes out of it. I did love that they put in there, no complaining, we're looking for solutions. I was like,
When
Oh,
is
I missed that.
when is that meeting, Abby?
Tuesday.
Yeah. Sorry.
Tuesday, they're doing it at Restaurant Court. The lots are building, I think it's at 5.
5 to 6:15.
Next Tuesday.
28th.
Yeah,
right.
I'll send you the link. It's an ABL meetup link, and you have to reserve your spot. And if you want, I can bring popcorn for all of us.
oh yeah.
What's happening? What's happening? Can't.
Put it in the comments. I was on there right now. Well, excited.
All right, ladies, this was awesome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy.
Of course. Yeah. If you have any questions or if there's anything I can help you with, like even if it's just looking up a piece of property and trying to help you understand like what a lease rate is or something like that on something, I'm happy to do that. We have all those resources. I'm in them all day long unless I'm showing property. So just ping me over a note and I'll help however I can.
Cool.
Thank y'all.
Sweet. See you later.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.